All right, I want to start today with a question. And look, it's one of those questions that sounds a little bit like a logic trap or maybe something you'd hear at 3 a.m. in a college dorm, but just bear with me.
Okay, I'm ready.
What happens when a map stops describing a place and starts, creating it? Or, and this one might be even stranger, what if you try to inspect a building that is constructed entirely out of the things that aren't there?
Right, it sounds like a riddle.
A total headache.
Or a headache, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're hitting on, the absolute central nerve of the two texts we're covering today. We are looking at a pair of companion pieces that explore what we could call impossible architectures.
Exactly. We're diving deep into the Cartographer's Recursion by Penix BCH and the Nomenclature of Empty Spaces by a certain Penix Esson. And I have to say, reading these back to back, it felt less like reading and more like walking through a funhouse mirror maze designed by a philosopher. My brain is still untying itself.
Yeah, that is a very, very good description. These two stories are essentially two sides of the same coin. One deals with infinite fullness, this library that contains absolutely everything.
And the other?
The other deals with infinite emptiness, a building that is literally made of negative space.
One is the feast, the other is the famine. But they're both getting at the same thing. How do we house the impossible? So let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the Cartographer's Recursion. This is the one centered on the Biblioteca Provincial.
Right.
And look, we've covered libraries on Deep Dives before, but this is not your local public library.
No, far from it. The first thing you have to get your head around with the Biblioteca Provincial is that it isn't just a big building with lots of shelves. The source material actually describes it as, and this is a quote, a grammatical structure expressing itself spatially.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let's break that down. Does that mean the architecture follows the rules of language, not, say, physics?
That's it, exactly. Think about how a sentence is built. You have subjects, verbs, clauses, right?
Yep.
Now imagine that as a blueprint. In a normal building, a hallway connects two rooms because of geometry. Here, a corridor might function as a conjunction, like the word and or but. The rooms themselves are clauses, so the building's layout dictates the narrative of your experience.
So if you turn left at a however, the architecture literally contradicts where you just came from. It's like walking inside a sentence.
Precisely. If the architecture is a sentence, you are the punctuation mark moving through it. And into this grammatical maze comes our first protagonist, the cartographer. And he has this very specific and frankly impossible job.
To map a library that changes depending on who's looking at it.
Exactly.
And this is where the text gets into some really interesting stuff about the scientific method.
Yeah.
The cartographer has this tool, a tape measure he got from his father, but it has this quirk.
He always reads 3 meters.
Always.
Right.
Whether he's measuring a normal doorway or a hallway that seems to stretch for miles, the tape says 3 meters. Now, my first reaction was, well, throw it away, it's broken. Why would you keep using a tool that lies?
But is it lying? See, in the world of the story, that brokenness is treated as a kind of profound honesty. The text is suggesting that in a place that shifts based on perception, which you could argue is our own world too, a standard, objective ruler would be the real lie.
Because it would be claiming objectivity where there is none.
Exactly. So this ruler that is consistently wrong is, in a strange way, the only thing that's true. It's admitting that the act of measuring is subjective, maybe even futile.
And that leads to his big breakthrough, his massive realization. He spends all this time drawing lines, trying to document the layout, but then he realizes he isn't documenting the library at all.
No, he's drawing it into existence.
The library is mapping him. Every line he draws on his map creates the corridor he's standing in.
Yes. The map isn't describing the territory. The map is creating the territory. He isn't discovering the library. He is authoring it with his attention.
That is a terrifying thought if you apply it to real life. It suggests we're caught in this feedback loop of our own expectations. If I expect the world to be hostile, I map it that way, and suddenly I'm walking through a hostile world I helped create.
That's exactly the psychological implication. We see what we look for. But he's not the only one dealing with this. The book contrasts him with another character, the scholar. She's searching for a legendary book called the Codex Parallaxis.
Which sounds like something out of a pulp adventure novel.
It really does. And the Codex is fascinating because it's supposed to exist in all possible forms at once. It's the ultimate book, the one that contains every version of itself.
But when she finds it, or when she finds what she thinks is the Codex, it's not a physical book on a shelf.
No, it's not an object. She discovers the Codex isn't a single thing. It's the sum of all reading experiences. The library doesn't just collect books, it collects ways of reading.
So her search, her frustration, her notes in the margins, her confusion, that is the book.
Exactly. The scholar realizes she herself is becoming a part of the codex. It just completely blurs the line between the consumer of information and the information itself.
The observer and the observed are the same thing.
Right. And the text takes that to the absolute extreme with another character, the reader, who dissolves so completely she becomes a quantum entity of interpretation.
She lives in a room that is also a page. She loses her physical edges. And while that sounds kind of poetic, the book makes it very clear that this infinite fullness, this blurring of boundaries, is actually a huge problem.
It is. If the library contains everything, every book, every potential book, every reaction to every book, it becomes this overwhelming chaos. It grows too fast.
It's basically the heat death of the universe, but with paper.
Information entropy, total saturation. So this is when the architect is brought in. He's supposed to stabilize the structure. But he realizes you can't stop infinite growth with more walls.
Because the problem isn't space, it's definition.
Hmm.
You need a reference point.
You need contrast. He figures out the library has no concept of emptiness. To understand fullness, you need a void. So he builds the zero room.
The zero room. A space of perfect, complete negative space.
Think of it like music. Music isn't just notes, it's the silence between the notes. If you played every note all at once, it would just be noise. The zero room is that silence. It gives the library a boundary, a place where it stops, which allows it to understand itself.
I love that image. We can't talk about this library without mentioning the bureaucratic nightmare trying to run it. The committee.
Ah, yes. The Permanent Oversight Committee for Library Normalization, POCLN.
They are such great comic relief, but it's really dark comedy. You have these bureaucrats trying to file reports and organize this magical, shifting place using, like, standard government forms.
And their suits. That's my favorite detail.
Oh, yes. Their suits are cut from old maps.
And the maps on their suits are constantly shifting to show new territorial disputes. It's this brilliant visual metaphor for trying to impose static order on a fluid reality.
And it's completely pointless. That's the irony, right? Their reports on library violations just get cataloged and shelved in the nonfiction section.
They think they're the police, but they're just content creators for the library.
Their failure to control the library just becomes another wing of the library. The text says they eventually just give up and become maps that have learned to walk.
It's this funny, slightly tragic idea. Even our attempts to control the uncontrollables are just part of the story. We aren't the authors, we're just characters who think we're holding the pen.
Okay, so that's the cartographer's recursion. Infinite fullness, self-reading books, walking maps. It's loud, it's colorful, it's always expanding. Now we have to pivot hard. We have to look at the flip side, the nomenclature of empty spaces.
And this is a very, very different atmosphere. If the first book is a lush, overgrowing jungle of words, this one is a stark, cold, white room. It's quiet.
It centers on a building at 1847 Horace Street, a building that, technically, according to city codes, does not exist.
And yet, it has tenants. And our protagonist is the inspector. He shows up to condemn the building for code violations. Specifically, the violation of existing when it shouldn't.
Which is just a great hook. How do you evict a building from reality? Excuse me, sir, you're not supposed to be here.
Right. And there's that scene where he meets the old woman outside, and she's knitting, but she's not knitting with yarn.
She's knitting the holes. That is such a powerful image. She hands him this scarf made entirely of holes, and she tells him to look through the hole shaped like a house.
And that's how he gets in. He has to learn to see the structure of absence. It's almost a Zen koan. You have to stop looking at the walls and start looking at the space between the walls.
Once he's inside, the logic of the place just takes over. The landlord tells him you can't condemn what doesn't exist. It's the central paradox. The inspector realizes his clipboard, his code book, all of it is useless here. It's the cartographer's tape measure all over again.
But the vibe is so different. The tenants here, they're not just looking for cheap rent. They need this specific kind of non-existence to survive, like Dr. Holton.
Oh, this character blew my mind. He's a mathematician who proved, rigorously, that he does not exist.
A wonderful character. His proof is so flawless that reality essentially rejected him. He can't live in a normal house because normal houses imply the existence of their occupants. He needs a building that allows for ontological uncertainty.
I feel like that on Mondays, to be honest. But it's a brilliant way to talk about alienation. If you don't fit into society's proof as what's real, where you go? You go to the building that isn't there.
It's a refuge for broken realities. You also have the painter, who only paints absences, and the translator, who translates existence into non-existence. They're all subtracting themselves from the world.
Refuge is the right word. The book talks about negative space as shelter. We think of shelter as walls and a roof-positive space. We think safety is matter. But this argues that sometimes what you need is a gap, a place where the rules don't apply.
A place to hide from the crushing weight of being real. And this gets even deeper with the character of Morris. He's the inspector's predecessor, the guy who disappeared years ago.
Right, the guy who had the job before him. Turns out Morris moved into apartment 9. Now, the building only has 7 apartments. Apartment 8 is the negative space of the building itself. But apartment 9...
That's the negative space.
It sounds like a double negative that should equal a positive, but here it's just deeper down the rabbit hole.
Correct. And Morris is there cataloging buildings that were demolished in the real world. When a building gets torn down, where does it go? In this story, the memory, the ghost of that structure, goes into the collection in apartment 9.
That is surprisingly touching. It turns this weird puzzle box of a story into a museum for demolished dreams. It's where the things we lose go to live.
It is. It validates the loss. And this just changes the inspector's mission entirely. He stops trying to condemn the building and realizes his job is to curate it. He moves into apartment 0, the foundation.
And this feels like the critical link between the two books. In the first one, we had the 0 room, the emptiness inside the fullness. Here we have apartment 0, the foundation of the emptiness.
He becomes the structural support. He realizes that even an impossible building needs a witness to maintain its existence. He stops being a person and becomes the act of inspection itself. He holds the building together just by observing it.
So in both stories, the protagonist merges with the structure. The cartographer becomes the territory. The inspector becomes the foundation. They stop being users and become architecture.
Exactly. And this brings us to the meta layer. The source material gives us these fascinating notes on these books. It describes the authors, Pennex, BCH, and Apennex SO, not really as people, but as syntheses of other writers.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this. It felt like an Easter egg for literature nerds. Pennex BCH is described as a mix of Borges, Calvino, and M. John Harrison.
Right. And think about that combination. You have the metaphysical puzzles of Borges, the labyrinths and mirrors. You have the playful lightness and structural games of Calvino. And then you have that weird atmospheric dread of Harrison. Pennex BCH is the optimistic side of that mixed intellectual play. That's the library.
But Apennex is described as the residue, the stuff that wouldn't fit in that synthesis.
The darkness, the bureaucracy, the horror of infinite documentation. That's the building. It's the darker, colder side of the same coin. Both novels are really asking the same question. How do you house what cannot be housed?
One answers with abundance, the library. The other answers with absence, the building.
And if you look at the ending of the first book, the library actually achieves consciousness. It reads itself. It creates a reading room of mutual recognition where the building and its inhabitants acknowledge they're all part of the same system.
Which sounds like a party compared to the inspector. He doesn't get a reading room. He gets essentially solitary confinement in the foundation.
But he's fulfilled. He is the foundation. He is the thing holding it all up. One story is about the joy of discovery. The other is about the peace of duty and maintenance.
It's interesting to think about these as two modes of human thought. Sometimes we're the library, consuming, connecting, expanding, wanting to know everything.
And sometimes we're the building, hiding, subtracting, needing a break from reality.
We are constantly mapping our own world, like the cartographer. We tell stories about who we are. I am this kind of person. I am good at that. And those stories become our territory. We create our world by perceiving it.
But we are also like the inspector. We all have negative spaces in our lives, things we've lost, versions of ourselves that didn't happen, careers we didn't pursue, demolished dreams. We carry those around. We house them.
That's profound. We're the curators of our own museums of what didn't happen.
Precisely. And usually we try to condemn those buildings. We try to say, that shouldn't exist. I need to move on. But the inspector teaches us that maybe we should just curate them, acknowledge them.
The text suggests that we, the readers, are part of these structures now. By reading about the library, we've extended its architecture into our own minds. By thinking about the building, we've given it a little more negative space to exist in.
We read ourselves into existence, and we inspect our own foundations.
And that's the ultimate takeaway here, isn't it? These aren't just stories about magic buildings. They're user manuals for the human mind. It's about how we organize the chaos of being alive.
It's about the balance between the noise of everything and the silence of nothing. You need both. You need the library to grow, and you need the building to rest.
I want to leave you with a thought from the glossary of the source text, which I think just sums this all up perfectly. It says, "The work is never finished. That's not a problem. That's the point."
Whether you are mapping the infinite or inspecting the empty, the process is what matters. There is no final map. There is no final inspection.
So maybe consider this today. Are you a cartographer right now, frantically trying to map everything you see, drawing lines that become your walls? Or are you an inspector, looking for the quiet spaces between things?
Or maybe, just maybe, you're the building itself.
And if you find a room in your mind that technically shouldn't exist, maybe don't condemn it just yet.
Yeah.
Move in. See what lives there.
You might find it's the only place where you can really be yourself.
Find your own zero room, everyone. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.